You've spent your whole life praying to feel peace, to feel seen, to be saved. But nothing changes. You kneel, you cry, you beg, and yet the silence stays. So you tell yourself, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe God is testing me. Maybe I just need to believe harder. But what if you're not praying to God at all? What if the God you believe in doesn't exist? If that made your stomach drop, like this video? Because this next part isn't for everyone. It's for those brave enough to question everything. And if you've ever felt like your faith was failing you, subscribe, because what you're about to hear might be the most spiritual thing anyone's ever told you. Carl Jung wasn't an atheist, but he also didn't believe in the God most people worship. He believed that for many, God is not a divine being. He's a projection, a mirror, built from childhood wounds, fears, shame, and unmet needs. You don't worship God. You worship the idea of someone who will never abandon you, never judge you, never stop loving you, even when you hate yourself. That's not faith. That's survival. The God you believe in may not be God. He may be the perfect parent you never had, the father who never yelled, the mother who never left, the protector who didn't let you down. You didn't meet God. You created him. And Jung said this happens because we all carry what he called the God image inside us. Not God himself, but a reflection of our psyche's deepest needs. So here's the uncomfortable truth. If your idea of God is built on fear, shame, and guilt, then you're not worshiping God. You're worshiping your trauma. That's why you feel empty after praying. That's why you never feel worthy enough. That's why your faith feels like something you're failing at, not something that's healing you. You weren't taught to love God. You were taught to fear disappointing him. That's not divine. That's psychological slavery. Carl Jung believed that real spirituality starts where false gods die. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because once you do that, once you face your shadow, your wounds, your darkest instincts, you no longer need a God to save you from yourself. You realize God was never out there. He was buried under all the parts of you that religion told you to reject. So ask yourself, when you pray, do you speak from love or from fear? Do you seek connection or relief? Do you want truth or comfort? Because most people don't want God. They want to feel safe, seen, forgiven. And instead of looking inward, they outsource it upward. But Jung believed that every time you avoid your shadow, every time you ignore the pain in you, you project it onto God. You turn him into a judge, a punisher, a rescuer, a parent, anything but the one thing he might truly be, a reflection of your highest self. That's why your prayers feel empty. You're not talking to God. You're begging your past not to repeat itself. And the silence you hear in return, it's not God turning away. It's your unconscious asking you to finally come home to you. You've tried to follow every rule. You've tried to be pure, kind, obedient, spiritual. But deep down, you still feel lost, still feel alone, still feel unworthy. That's not because God left you. It's because the version of God you were given was never real to begin with. Jung said, "Religion is a defense against a religious experience." Because most people don't want to meet God. They want to meet comfort, certainty, a system. But real divinity asks something more terrifying. It asks you to let go of who you think you are, to confront your inner chaos, to die to your false self. And only then do you begin to sense the presence that was never outside of you. You didn't find God. You built him. You built him when your father walked out, when your mother couldn't hold your pain, when you were told to sit still, smile, be good, even when your soul was screaming. You built him out of need, out of longing, out of all the silence you were too young to understand. Carl Jung believed that every person unconsciously creates an image of God, but that image is rarely divine. It's a psychic container for your deepest fears, needs, and unmet emotions. So when you were abandoned, your God became the one who stays. When you were shamed, your God became the one who forgives. When you were powerless, your God became the one who rescues. That isn't wrong. It's human. But here's the danger. You're not relating to God. You're relating to your pain. You think you're worshiping God, but really, you're begging someone to finally say, "You're not too much. You're not a mistake. You don't have to earn love anymore." That's not spirituality. That's reparenting. And Jung saw this everywhere. People praying, seeking, surrendering, not to divine truth, but to the shadow of their childhood. Think about it. When you imagine God, is he gentle or angry? Distant or close? Punishing or patient? Now think. What were your parents like? What did you have to become to be loved by them? Did you have to be perfect? Quiet? Responsible? Invisible? That's the script your nervous system still runs. And that's the version of God you unconsciously obey. Carl Jung said, "The God image is the most powerful archetype in the human psyche." Why? Because it holds everything you were never allowed to feel, and everything you've always hoped to find. But if you don't make that unconscious God image conscious, it will rule your faith, and you'll call it devotion. You'll stay small because you think God wants humility, when really, you're just afraid to be seen. You'll punish yourself because you think God demands sacrifice, when really, you've never been taught self-worth. You'll feel distant from God because you're still distant from yourself. And here's the brutal truth. You can't meet God while hiding from yourself. As long as you reject your darkness, you reject the part of you where divinity lives. Because the divine doesn't just show up in light. It shows up in the places you're most ashamed of, most afraid of, most disconnected from. The anger, the grief, the rage, the craving, the silence. That's where God waits. But that's not what you were told, right? You were told that God lives in churches, in scriptures, in obedience, in purity. You were told to kneel, to confess, to repent, and still, you never felt whole. Because God can't enter a version of you that isn't real. And the mask you wear to feel holy is the same one that keeps you separated from healing. Jung believed that true spirituality isn't about perfection. It's about wholeness. It's not about becoming good. It's about becoming real. And to become real, you must meet every abandoned part of you and love it back to life. Because only when you reclaim yourself Can you recognize the God that was never outside of you? So what do you do now? You stop praying for permission. You stop performing for grace. You stop begging for forgiveness from a God that only existed to cover your wounds. You go deeper. You say, "Show me what I've been avoiding. Show me where I'm not free. Show me what version of you I created just to survive." And then you sit in the silence, not because God isn't speaking, but because for the first time, you're ready to hear him. Let's be honest. You don't want to let go of the God you believe in, even if he's silent, even if he doesn't answer, even if you only feel guilt, pressure, and shame in his name. He's familiar. He's safe. He's the version you built to survive. So when I say, the God you believe in doesn't exist, I'm not attacking your faith. I'm calling you into something deeper. Because real spirituality begins where your comfortable faith dies. Carl Jung called this the death of the ego's God. It's not the death of God himself, but the death of the version you created to avoid facing your shadow. The one who loves you only when you're good. The one who punishes you when you feel desire. The one who disappears every time you feel unworthy. That God was never God. He was your fear in disguise. And the moment you start waking up to that, everything breaks. Your beliefs, your routines, your prayers. The system collapses. Because what you thought was holy was actually a mirror reflecting your pain. This is where people get lost. They walk away from religion, but don't walk toward themselves. They say, God isn't real, but never ask, then who was I praying to? That's not healing. That's spiritual avoidance. And Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, even if it means calling their trauma God. But if you're brave enough, something powerful happens here. You sit in the rubble of your false faith and whisper the question that terrifies every part of you. If that wasn't God, then who is? And for the first time, there's no voice from the clouds, no thunder, no commandment, just stillness, raw, silent, empty. And it hurts, not because God is gone, but because you're finally here. This moment, this collapse, is what Jung believed to be the beginning of true individuation, the sacred unraveling. Because the real God isn't the one who fits inside your fear. He's the one who burns it down. You'll feel lost. You'll feel betrayed. You'll feel like everything you believed was a lie. But here's what you'll also feel. Maybe for the first time. Freedom. Because now, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to perform. You don't have to beg for love that was already inside you. You just have to show up. Fully. Honestly. Without shame. And that is worship. The death of your false God is the birth of your real self. And ironically, it's the first time you're actually capable of knowing anything divine. Not because you read it, not because someone preached it, but because it broke you open and called you inward. Because the version of God who only loves you when you're worthy was just your shadow, dressed in holiness. Carl Jung believed that to truly meet God, you have to go through hell, your own. The hell of being abandoned, the hell of being unseen, the hell of feeling like a sinner just for being human. But once you walk through that fire, you don't come out clean. You come out real. And maybe that's all God ever wanted. So you let the false God die. You stopped praying to the sky for rescue. You stopped begging your past to forgive you. You stopped trying to be good enough for a love that was never based on truth. And for a while, you felt nothing. No peace, no joy, just silence. But then something happened, something you couldn't explain. You saw your reflection. You heard a quiet thought. You felt a stillness so heavy it made you want to weep, not from pain, but from recognition. Because in that moment, you weren't alone. Carl Jung believed that once you dismantle the God image that was built from trauma, you create space to encounter what he called the self, the center of your being, where both light and darkness live together. And that self is divine. Not in a blasphemous, egoic way, but in the sense that God can finally be met, not as a rescuer, but as a mirror. Not outside of you, but through you. You realize God isn't hiding. He's waiting. In every part of you, you've been afraid to feel. In the tears you held back. In the rage you buried. In the joy you didn't believe you deserved. In the silence you always tried to escape. He was never in the rules. He was never in the fear. He was never in the voice that said you weren't enough. That wasn't God. That was programming, conditioning, inherited shame. And now that it's gone, you feel the space it left behind. It's not empty. It's sacred. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." That's what this is. You're not losing faith. You're waking up. You start to realize you don't need God to fix you, because you were never broken. You need God to walk with you, through the grief, through the rage, through the confusion, not above you, but within you. You stop saying, "God, take this away," and start saying, "God, walk with me through it." You stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start asking, "What is this here to show me?" Because now you understand. God isn't the absence of pain. He's the presence inside it. The real God doesn't demand you shrink. He invites you to expand. He doesn't want your performance. He wants your honesty. He doesn't ask for blind obedience. He asks for your full awareness, your conscious participation in the miracle of becoming. And most of all, he doesn't speak through fear. He speaks through truth. And truth feels like remembering. When Jung spoke of the divine, he didn't point upward. He pointed inward. He believed that to experience God, you had to become whole. Not perfect, not holy, just whole. That means integrating everything you've rejected. The sinner, the liar, the coward, the lover, the dreamer, the wounded child, all of it, all of you. Because when you can stand before all of that and not flinch, that's where God meets you. Not to save you, not to punish you, but to say, "You were never separate from me. You just forgot who you were. You searched in temples. You whispered prayers in the dark. You begged in silence, hoping something, someone, would finally answer. And after all the years, after all the guilt, shame, worship, fear, sacrifice, silence. You come face to face with a truth that doesn't scream. It whispers. I was never out there. I've always been here, inside you. Carl Jung didn't believe God was a distant king sitting on a throne. He believed God was an experience, a force you awaken the moment you face yourself. And the more of yourself you welcome, the more of God you begin to feel. Because there is no divinity without depth, no spiritual breakthrough without breakdown, no healing without honesty. You were taught to kneel, but maybe the divine was waiting for you to stand, to stop apologizing for existing, to stop performing for love, to stop mistaking obedience for connection. Because the more you abandon yourself in the name of faith, the further you drift from the only place where God ever lived, within. And now you see it clearly. God is not a rescuer. He's not a reward. He's not a test. He is the spark inside you that never went out, even when the world told you you were too much, too broken, too unworthy. He is the moment you speak the truth you were never allowed to say. He is the tear you finally let fall. He is the boundary you set after decades of silence. God is not what saves you from your shadow. God is what walks with you through it. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be holy. You just need to be real. Because when you are, you'll realize something wild. You are not looking for God. God is looking through you. Every time you gave love when you had none left, He was there. Every time you held someone else's hand in their darkness, He was there. Every time you collapsed, broke, screamed, and still chose to try again, He was there. Not in judgment, but in presence. Not watching, but becoming. So no, the God you believed in doesn't exist. Not the one made of rules, not the one made of shame, not the one who needed you to suffer just to feel worthy. That was the version born from your wounds. And now, you've buried Him. What rises in His place isn't a new religion. It's a new relationship with yourself, with truth, with every sacred, wounded, beautiful part of your being. You are not separate from God. You never were. The voice you longed to hear was your own. The peace you begged for was waiting in your body. The love you prayed for was buried under layers of shame. And now, you're ready to return to it. No more fear, no more pretending, no more chasing. Because now, you remember, God doesn't need to find you. He was waiting for you to find yourself. If this video shattered something inside you, like it, so it finds someone else who's ready to finally come home. If you've ever felt disconnected from faith, if you've ever felt abandoned by the very God you trusted, subscribe. Because here, we speak truth. We don't kneel to shame. We walk into wholeness. And if this made you feel something deep, comment below. I remember who I am. Let the algorithm show others they're not alone in this awakening. Because this is not the end of your spiritual journey. This is where it actually begins.